The nurse's station had a letter saying I'd been declared incompetent. That's when I knew my in-laws had finally made their move, labeling me confused so they could seize the house my husband and I built over 40 years. They scheduled a forced tax sale for that Friday. But my grandson Leo showed up that morning with a document that changed everything. A deed with his name on it. And the quiet boy I'd raised had just outmaneuvered them at their own game. My name is Rose, and this is how a grandson's loyalty reversed a theft and brought me home. The house at 1427 Maple Street was the life Harold and I built over 43 years. Every brick, every rose. When cancer took him, it became my anchor. But my sons-in-laws saw a $300,000 property and a widow they could dispose of. They manufactured a narrative of confusion, fabricated a tax delinquency, and set an auction to seize everything. They believed I was old and defeated. They overlooked one person, my grandson Leo. 17 years old, dismissed by the family, but quietly assembling a counterstrike that would use their own scheme to save me. Let me tell you what it feels like to sit in a vinyl chair by a window that doesn't open while strangers discuss your competence as if you've already died. Every morning at Sunrise Haven, a nurse calls my name with the same false cheer, the one that says confused old woman. I never was confused, but that's what Quentin and Eleanor Vance needed everyone to believe. 1427 Maple Street isn't just a house. Harold and I bought the lot in 1978 with the $5,000 his mother left us. He laid the foundation himself, weekends and evenings with his own hands. I planted the roses along the front walk, 17 bushes, one for each year we were married before Michael was born. Over the decades, that house held first steps, first words, birthday parties, and the quiet, sacred rhythm of a long marriage. When Harold was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2020, he spent his last good months in the garden, telling me which fertilizer to use each season, as if the roses would need him forever. He passed on a Tuesday in October. The house felt too large and too silent, but it was still ours. I stayed because leaving would have been a second death. Our son Michael, bright, kind, but weak, married Lydia Vance in 2021. She was beautiful in a practiced way, all expensive perfumes and precise manners. Her parents, Quentin and Eleanor, owned a chain of car dealerships and treated everyone like inventory. They never liked me. I was the simple mother-in-law who still mowed her own lawn and wore department store clothes, but they saw value in my house. $320,000, assessed, free and clear. The first hint came 6 months after Harold's funeral. Eleanor stopped by unannounced with a bottle of wine and a string of seemingly casual observations. Rose, darling, have you noticed you're getting a bit forgetful? You didn't remember our lunch last week. There had been no lunch. I told her that. She waved her hand. Oh, see? That's exactly what I mean. The pattern continued. A misplaced checkbook here, a forgotten phone call there, small, insidious suggestions that I was slipping. Then Quentin started dropping numbers. What the house could sell for. How the market was hot. How a senior community might be safer for someone my age. But the real escalation came on a Sunday afternoon when Lydia and Michael sat me at my own kitchen table and pulled out a folder from the county tax office. It claimed back taxes were owed, nearly $15,000, and that the county had scheduled a forced sale. Michael looked devastated but utterly convinced. Mom, they're going to sell the house out from under you unless we take action now. We need to move you to a care facility and let Dad's estate cover the debt. That was the lie. The tax debt was a complete fabrication, but the machinery was already grinding. Quentin had arranged a competency hearing, complete with a doctor's letter stating I showed signs of cognitive decline. I never met that doctor. The letter appeared at the nurse's station the day I was admitted to Sunrise Haven, exactly as I described. After that, it was a blur of transferred signatures, legal documents, and a judge who barely looked at me. The sale of 1427 Maple Street was set for Friday, October 12th. The notice came on lavender-scented letterhead from the care facility's administrator, like a birthday greeting. For 2 weeks, I sat in that beige room and watched the days bleed together. I called Michael. He didn't answer. Lydia texted, "We're handling it, relax." I wrote letters to legal aid, but the facility screened my mail. I was 76 years old, a prisoner in a comfortable cage, while my husband's home was being sold to the very people who had locked me in. But I had one visitor they didn't anticipate. Leo, my grandson, Michael and Lydia's son, arrived on a rainy Thursday, 2 days before the auction. He was 17, tall and thin, with Harold's unruly hair and a quiet intensity that had always unnerved his mother. He'd been sent to boarding school at Lydia's insistence. She said he needed discipline. In truth, he saw the Vances for what they were and refused to play along. The staff tried to stop him at the front desk. Rules about unregistered visitors. Leo just looked at the nurse with that steady gaze and said, "Either you let me see my grandmother now, or I call the county ombudsman and report the forged tax documents." They blinked and let him through. He hugged me in the hallway, then we sat in the community room, ignoring the other residents slumped around a television. He kept his voice low. "Grandma, I've been tracking the auction. Grandpa Harold's old friend from the bank, Mr. Hammond, he's been helping me." Leo pulled out a folder, dog-eared and thick with photocopies. "The tax lien is fake. Quentin paid a low-level county clerk to backdate a filing. I have proof. But even better, I've been saving every dollar since I was 15. You know that landscaping business Dad made me give up? I kept going on weekends at school, cash jobs. I have enough for a down payment. Mr. Hammond helped me set up a blind trust, so nobody knows I'm the buyer." I stared at him. "Leo, you're 17. You can't. I can. The trust is legal. I'll be at the auction. I'll outbid them. The house will be mine. And once it's mine, you're coming home. They can't keep you here when there's no tax sale. The whole scheme collapses." My heart felt too big for my chest. That boy, my quiet, underestimated grandson, had spent 2 years preparing for this moment while his own parents played accomplice to greed. He slid a burner phone into my hand. "Keep this hidden. I'll text you updates. The auction is at 10 a.m. Friday, by noon, everything changes." He kissed my forehead and left the way he came, a boy on the edge of manhood, carrying a war plan. That night, I didn't sleep. The phone stayed hidden in my mattress. At 3:47 in the morning, it buzzed once. A message from Leo. "I'm at the courthouse doors already. They won't beat me. I promise. Love you, Grandma." I watched the ceiling and listened to the institutional hum of the facility, the sound of old people breathing, of lives suspended. In 15 hours, the house Harold built would be on the auction block, and only Leo stood between it and the Vances. That and a secret he'd discovered about Quentin's past. A secret that could turn the entire room against him the moment he raised his paddle. But I wouldn't learn about that until the call came at 11:30 Friday morning, when my world tilted on its axis and Leo's voice, steady as Harold's, said 2 words, "I won." And then, but you need to hear what happened next. The phone was hot against my ear. I pressed it closer, hiding under my blanket so the night nurse wouldn't hear. Leo's voice came through thin but steady, like he was standing right next to me. "Grandma, it's done. 1427 Maple Street is mine. The deed is in my trust. You're coming home." I closed my eyes. The relief was so sharp it hurt. But I needed to know everything. "Leo, start from the beginning. Tell me how a 17-year-old boy walked into a room full of predators and walked out with our house. On the other end of the line, I heard him exhale. Then, the story poured out. The county auction room was on the third floor of the old courthouse, a windowless box with fluorescent lights and rows of folding chairs that smelled like dust and old coffee. Leo arrived at 9:30, 30 minutes early. He wore the navy blazer I'd bought him for his 8th grade graduation, now tight across the shoulders. He brought Mr. Hammond, the bank officer, as his witness, and a leather document case that held the cashier's check for the deposit. They sat in the back row and watched the players file in. Quentin Vance arrived 5 minutes before 10 with his lawyer, a sleek man named Crawley who specialized in property acquisitions. Eleanor came too, dressed like she was attending a charity gala, all cold elegance and perfume. The three of them took seats in the front, confident, entitled. Quentin kept checking his watch, as though the whole proceeding was an inconvenience he was forced to endure. A few other bidders trickled in, a developer looking for teardowns, a rental investor in jeans. But everyone sensed this wasn't an ordinary auction. There was a tension in the air Leo described as the smell before a thunderstorm. The auctioneer set up his podium. He read the property address, the assessed value, the terms of the forced sale. The opening bid was $30,000, a fraction of what the house was worth. Quentin raised his paddle immediately. 31,000, the developer countered. But his heart wasn't in it. By 50,000, he dropped out. The rental investor stayed until 80. Then it was just Quentin and one other bidder. A bidder in the back row whose hands didn't tremble. Leo raised his paddle. Quentin twisted around in his chair. The look on his face, Leo said, was something between fury and disbelief. He hadn't registered his own grandson as competition. He'd calculated everything, the competency hearing, the fake tax filing, the care facility, but he'd never factored in the boy he'd mocked as the gardener. Quentin bid 90,000. Leo went to 95. Quentin 100. Leo 105. The auctioneer's voice picked up a rhythm, a chant, like this was sport. At 120,000, Quentin's lawyer leaned over and whispered something sharp. Quentin's jaw tightened. He bid 130. Then Leo did something no one expected. He stood up. He addressed the auctioneer directly, his voice loud enough for the whole room. Before we go any further, I'd like to enter the following document into the county record. He pulled a folder from his leather case and passed it forward. It's a sworn affidavit from the county tax assessor's office, dated yesterday. It states that the tax delinquency on 1427 Maple Street was filed in error and that the original filing was flagged for investigation. As of this morning, the property is not legally in default. The room went silent. The auctioneer opened the folder, scanned the document, and his expression changed. He called for a recess, and the whole proceeding lurched to a halt. Quentin rose from his chair. "This is nonsense," he said. "A child playing games. The sale is valid," but the auctioneer held up a hand. "I have to verify this with the county clerk. If the tax lien was filed in error, the premise of this sale is void." For 20 minutes, Leo stood in the back of that room with his heart pounding, while the auctioneer made calls. Eleanor's face was carved from ice. Quentin paced. Crawley, the lawyer, was already backpedaling, suggesting unfortunate misunderstandings. What Leo had done wasn't just clever, it was surgical. The affidavit wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the trigger for a fraud investigation that had been quietly building for weeks. Mr. Hammond, it turned out, wasn't just a bank officer. He was Harold's oldest friend, and Harold, before he died, had suspected the Vances. He'd met with Mr. Hammond 3 weeks before the pancreatic cancer took him and said, "If my son's new family ever goes after Rose, the house, you look after them." I've kept notes on the father-in-law's business practices. They don't hold up to scrutiny. Harold had been a quiet man, a builder, But he'd spent his last months watching Quentin's dealership empire from the edges, noticing things. A pattern of property liens on older homeowners, a habit of acquiring houses through tax errors. He'd filed those notes with Mr. Hammond, never telling me, because he didn't want to worry me. The notes became Leo's roadmap. When the auctioneer returned, his face was grim. The sale is suspended pending a full review by the county. This property cannot be legally transferred until the investigation is complete. He looked at Quentin. I'd advise you to leave, Mr. Vance. I've been told the sheriff's fraud unit has been alerted. Quentin's color drained. Eleanor grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the door. As they passed Leo, Eleanor leaned in close enough for only him to hear. You've made a terrible mistake. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Leo just looked at her. Neither do you. He walked out of the courthouse into the October sun, Mrs. Hammond beside him. The deed wasn't in his name yet, not officially, but the house was frozen. Protected, the Vances couldn't touch it. And the investigation that Harold had quietly seeded was now in motion, with a paper trail leading straight back to a certain low-level county clerk and a forged tax filing. But the real revelation came 45 minutes later when the sheriff's investigator met Leo in the parking lot. She was a woman named Detective Marisol Reyes, and she'd been looking into the Vance family for 18 months. She told Leo something that made his blood run cold. Quentin Vance was not a legitimate businessman. The car dealerships were a front to launder money from a much older enterprise, Elder Fraud. Over 15 years, he and Eleanor had targeted vulnerable seniors with homes of high value and no close family. They would engineer competency hearings, fake tax liens, and forced sales, then vanish the proceeds through shell companies in the Caribbean. His mother, Lydia, was an accessory. My son, Michael, had married into a family of predators who'd already stolen 14 houses before they ever set their sights on Maple Street. Detective Reyes had been building a RICO case. The only missing piece was a witness inside the family, a pattern of behavior tied to a specific victim. Leo had just handed her the missing piece. When he finally called me and finished the story, I could barely speak. My grandson wasn't just the savior of our house. He was the keystone in bringing down an entire criminal network. But Grandma, he said, there's one more thing. They're not going to let this go. Quentin's already lawyering up. And Mom, Dad, they're still on their side. The care facility has you listed as a ward of the state until a judge releases you. We don't just have to win the house. We have to get you out of there. Tonight, I thought of the lavender-scented letter, of the locked windows, of the nurse who called me confused. I thought of Harold's roses, wilting, without me. Then let's get me out, I said, before they realize you've already checkmated them on the board they built. Leo promised he'd be at Sunrise Haven within the hour, with a court order and a social worker. He had one more card to play, the sealed medical file from the doctor who'd falsely declared me incompetent, now willing to testify. But Quentin had influence over the facility's director, and a phone call could accelerate plans to move me to a secured memory ward where visitors aren't allowed. The line went dead. I sat in the dark, the burner phone clutched in my hand, counting minutes. Outside my door, I heard the night nurse's cart squeak past, then stop. Keys jangled. A voice I didn't recognize said, "The Vance family has requested an urgent transfer. We're to prepare Mrs. Vance, for transport immediately." I shoved the phone under the mattress and pretended to sleep. But my mind was racing. This was the moment Harold had warned me about. The moment when the predators don't wait for the system to catch up. They move first. And the door to my room swung open. The door swung inward, and the fluorescent light from the hallway poured in like bleach. Two figures stood there. The night nurse, Miss Halsey, a woman with thin lips and a permanent expression of bureaucratic indifference, and a broad-shouldered orderly I'd never seen before, his hands already gripping the handles of a transport wheelchair. "Miss Bennett," Miss Halsey said, not unkindly but with no warmth either. We need to move you to a different wing. Doctor's orders. I didn't move. At midnight? That's not protocol. I'd like to speak with the administrator. That won't be possible. She stepped into the room, and the orderly followed. The wheelchair's wheels squeaked against the linoleum. Your family has requested the transfer for your safety. The paperwork is in order. Which family? I demanded. My son Michael? Because I haven't spoken to him in 3 weeks. My grandson Leo is my only family, and I just spoke to him. He's coming here. Ms. Halsey's face didn't twitch, but I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or irritation at a complication. She reached for the small overnight bag on the chair by the window, the one I'd packed with a few clothes and Harold's photo. You can discuss that in the morning. Right now, you're being moved to the secure memory floor. For your own protection. Secure memory floor. I knew what that meant. No visitors without administrator approval. No phone calls. A locked ward where confused residents could be medicated into silence. Once I was behind those doors, Leo's court order wouldn't matter. Quentin could delay, appeal, bury me in procedure until I really was confused. I stalled. I need to use the bathroom first. We can wait. No, I have a stomach condition. I'll be a few minutes. I stood, moving slowly, feigning frailty. My hand slipped under the mattress, retrieving the burner phone. They didn't see it. I shuffled toward the bathroom, closed the door, locked it. The phone buzzed in my palm. A text from Leo, 5 minutes away. Hold on. I flushed the toilet for show, ran the water, and then I did something desperate. I dialed 911. The operator answered, and I whispered as loudly as I dared, "My name is Rose Bennett. I'm at Sunrise Haven Care Facility on Millwood Road. I'm being moved against my will. My grandson has a court order for my release. Please send someone." The operator started to ask questions, but the bathroom door rattled. "Mrs. Bennett, if you don't come out, we'll have to assist you." I dropped the phone into the trash can, hoping the line stayed open. When I opened the door, Miss Halsey's patience had expired. The orderly stepped forward, and she said, "Mr. Carver will help you into the chair." I'm not getting in that chair. Carver's hands closed around my upper arm. Firm, not gentle, but not quite violent either. I didn't scream. Screaming would give them exactly what they wanted, evidence of irrational behavior. I let my body go slack, a technique I'd learned decades ago while caring for agitated patients. Dead weight. He had to adjust his grip, and for a moment, I was too heavy to lift cleanly. That moment was enough. Footsteps pounded down the hallway. The front desk buzzer shrieked. Voices collided. One deep and authoritative, the other belonging to a young man who sounded like Harold when he was angry. "Leo, stop right there," a woman's voice commanded. "Detective Reyes, Sheriff's Fraud Unit. This woman is not to be moved. I have a court order and a warrant for the facility director's arrest." Carver released me. "Ms." Halsey stepped back, her composure cracking. Leo appeared in the doorway, breathless, his navy blazer askew, a sheaf of papers clutched in one hand. Behind him stood a compact woman with sharp eyes and a badge clipped to her belt, Detective Marisol Reyes. Beside her, a county social worker I didn't recognize held up a laminated ID. "Grandma," Leo pushed past the orderly and wrapped his arms around me. "I'm here. You're safe." Detective Reyes stepped into the room, her presence filling it. She looked at Miss Halsey with the calm authority of someone who'd dealt with 100 bullies before breakfast. "Ma'am, I suggest you call your director. He's wanted for conspiracy to commit elder fraud. If you'd like to avoid being named as an accessory, you'll wait in the staff lounge while we process the release." Miss Halsey's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I was following orders, then you'll have no problem explaining that in a statement. Now step aside." She stepped aside. The social worker, a kind-eyed woman named Mrs. Delgado, took my hand. Mrs. Bennett, we're going to take you somewhere safe now. Your grandson has secured emergency guardianship. The facility no longer has any legal authority over you. Just like that, the cage unlocked. Leo helped me gather my things, the overnight bag, Harold's photo, the burner phone from the trash can. As we walked out, I saw Detective Reyes placing handcuffs on a man in a rumpled suit who'd appeared from the administrator's office. The director. He was sputtering about lawyers and lawsuits, but Reyes just recited his rights in a monotone. The night air outside Sunrise Haven was cold and clean. I breathed it in like water after a drought. Leo and I sat in the back of Mrs. Delgado's sedan while she drove us to a small house on the other side of town, Mr. Hammond's house. He met us at the door with a pot of coffee and a look of profound relief. But the story wasn't over, not by a long shot. We gathered in Mr. Hammond's living room, surrounded by doilies and bookshelves, while Detective Reyes arrived and laid out the full scope of what we were dealing with. She spread 3 thick folders across the coffee table, each one labeled with a different name, a different victim. Quentin Vance and his wife Eleanor have been running this scheme for at least 15 years, she said. They target seniors with valuable property and no close family who'd fight back. They forge tax liens, orchestrate competency hearings, and force auctions. The houses are sold, the proceeds laundered through their dealerships, and the victims are warehoused in facilities. Or worse. She opened the first folder. George and Mildred Calloway, ages 82 and 79, no children. Their Craftsman bungalow in North County sold for $240,000 in 2018. The tax lien was fake. George died in a state home 6 months later. Mildred is still there, and she still asks when she can go home. Second folder. Evelyn Cross, age 85, widow. Her farmhouse on 10 acres sold for $360,000 in 2019. She was moved to a memory care unit in the same facility you were in, Rose. She's still there. No family. Third folder. The Henderson sisters, both in their 80s, never married. Their Victorian was worth over $500,000. Quentin bought it through a shell company at auction for $75,000. The sisters were separated into different facilities. One died last year. The other is in a locked ward, heavily medicated. I stared at the photos of these strangers, these people whose lives had been erased just like mine nearly was. My hands shook, but not with fear, with rage. Detective Reyes closed the folders. We've identified 14 properties so far. But here's the part that makes this bigger than a fraud case. She leaned forward. 2 years ago, a county clerk named Frank Dobbs started asking too many questions about a string of unusually favorable auction outcomes. He was about to bring his findings to the state attorney general. Then his car went off a mountain road. No skid marks. The brakes failed. Frank survived, barely, but he's been in a wheelchair ever since, and he's terrified to talk. The room went very quiet. Mr. Hammond cleared his throat. Harold told me something once, he said slowly. He said Quentin had a habit of solving problems permanently. He used the word accidents. But Harold was sick by then, and I thought maybe he was paranoid. The medications? No, Detective Reyes shook her head. He wasn't paranoid. We found notes in his safety deposit box, notes he'd left with a lawyer, to be opened only if something happened to him. He must have trusted the lawyer. Those notes just reached us last week. He'd been tracking Frank Dobbs's case. He suspected Quentin tampered with that car. He just couldn't prove it yet. Another silence. This one weighed more. Leo spoke, his voice tight. So Quentin might have killed people. And now he knows I exposed him. He knows where the house is. Which is why you're not going back to Maple Street tonight, Detective Reyes said. We're arranging protective custody. But first, we need to bring in your mother and your father, Leo. Michael and Lydia may be witnesses, or they may be accessories. Either way, they're being questioned now. The mention of my son hit like a physical blow. Michael, weak Michael, who'd let this happen. I hadn't said his name in the panic of the last hours, but now I felt the old ache. The same ache I'd felt when he was a boy with a fever, when he'd fall off his bike, when he'd cry after Harold scolded him. He was a victim too, in his way, but victims still have choices. I asked to call him. Detective Reyes hesitated, then nodded. We've already separated them. Lydia is in custody. Michael is at the station cooperating. He's not handling it well, but he's talking. He's giving us everything. I dialed his number. It rang 5 times before he answered, and when he did, his voice was raw. Mom? Michael, Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about the fake tax thing or the other houses. Lydia told me you were getting confused, that the house had back taxes, that this was the only way. She said the facility was the best one, that you'd be safe. I believed her. I closed my eyes. I know you did. But you didn't visit. You didn't answer my calls. They told me you needed rest. That visit's upset you. Mom, I'm so sorry. His voice cracked. Leo, is Leo okay? He's fine. He saved me. He saved the house. A long, shaky exhale. I'll testify. Whatever they need. I want to help. I want to make this right. I didn't know if I could forgive him yet, but I told him we'd talk soon, and I hung up. The coffee had gone cold in my hands. The next hours were a blur of legal documents, phone calls, and the strange, suspended feeling of being safe but not yet free. Detective Reyes told us Quentin had fled the county. They'd issued a warrant, but he'd vanished, and Eleanor was lawyered up and saying nothing. Lydia, Leo's mother, was singing a different tune. She blamed her father for everything, claimed she was a victim too. The district attorney would sort it out. But as dawn broke over Mr. Hammond's house, Leo and I knew we couldn't stay in hiding forever. The house, our house, was still there. The roses were dying. And I needed to go home. We drove to Maple Street in a police cruiser with a patrol car behind us. The streets were quiet. Sunday morning. The sun was just coming up over the rooftops. Our house came into view. The same white porch, the same gabled roof, but the lawn was overgrown and the rose bushes looked like skeletons. There was a car in the driveway. A black sedan. Not Leo's. Not a police vehicle. Detective Reyes had told us the property was secured. No one should be there. But the sedan was parked right in front of the garage, and the driver's door was open. Leo reached for his phone. The social worker, who'd accompanied us, told me to wait in the car. But I opened my door. Grandma, no, I looked at him. This is my home, Leo. Harold and I built it. If someone is here, I want to face them. I stepped out of the cruiser and walked toward the front gate. The walkway bricks Harold had laid were uneven now, but they still held. I pushed the gate open. The front door of 1427 Maple Street was ajar, a sliver of darkness beyond. And then a voice came from inside. A man's voice, cold and familiar. Welcome home, Rose. I've been waiting for you. I knew that voice. It had lived in the back of my mind for 3 years, the voice that told me I was confused, that the house wasn't mine, that I should just cooperate. Quentin Vance was inside my home, and for one frozen second, I couldn't move. Leo grabbed my arm. Grandma, don't. But I pulled free. Not because I wasn't afraid. I was terrified. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. But I had spent 3 months in a cage because of this man. I had been stripped of my dignity, my home, my name. I would not be a coward at my own front door. I stepped across the threshold. The living room was dim, the curtains drawn as I'd left them before they took me. The same furniture, the same lamp, the same photograph of Harold and me on our 40th anniversary. But now a man sat in Harold's armchair. Quentin, he was wearing a dark suit, no tie, his silver hair perfectly combed. In one hand, he held a glass of amber liquid, my husband's good bourbon, and in the other, a slim folder. He didn't rise, just watched me with a flat, predatory calm. "Rose, please, come in." "You too, Leo. This is a family conversation after all." Leo stepped up beside me, his body rigid. "The police are on their way. They tracked you here." Quentin smiled. "I'm sure they did. But I'm not going to run. I came to offer you a deal. The investigation into the tax lien is very messy, very slow. By the time it resolves, my lawyers will have buried the county in paperwork. Your facility transfer was unfortunate, but I have connections that can make it go away. Eleanor is prepared to take a minor plea, nothing more. What I'm offering is this. Drop your testimony, convince the prosecutor to accept a misdemeanor plea, and I'll personally ensure that this house is returned to you, free and clear, with a cash settlement of $200,000 for your trouble." He said it like he was negotiating a car sale, as if he hadn't tried to strip my life away. Leo started to speak, but I put my hand on his arm and held it there. "You forged tax documents," I said quietly. "You had a doctor lie about my mental state. You locked me in a room for 3 months and tried to sell my home. And now you want to pay me off?" "I want what's practical." Quentin took a sip of the bourbon. "Litigation will take years, and you're not a young woman. The stress, the publicity, it's not good for your health. Michael doesn't want to see his mother dragged through court. Surely you can be reasonable." "Reasonable?" The word came out like a laugh. "Quentin, I've been a widow for 3 years, a prisoner for 3 months, and a nurse for 43 years. I've held the hands of dying men who spent their last breath asking for one more day. I know what matters. And you? You're a thief with a clean suit." He set the glass down on the side table right beside the coaster Harold had always insisted I use. "I'm trying to give you an easy way out. Take it. I have resources, Rose. I can make things very difficult. You already did." I stepped closer. "You sent a night nurse and an orderly to wheel me into a locked ward. You had a county clerk risk his life to file a fake lien. But you made one mistake. You underestimated my grandson." Quentin's eyes flicked to Leo. "The boy." "Yes, an impressive little gambit at the auction. But he's 17. What does he think he'll do? Raise enough money to maintain this place? Fight off my legal team with his trust fund from mowing lawns?" "No," Leo said, his voice low and even. "I'll do it with the 14 case files your former bookkeeper turned over to Detective Reyes this morning. You remember Mrs. Ellison? She kept copies of every transaction, every shell company, every fake lien. She didn't like how you treated the Henderson sisters." Quentin's face changed. The predatory calm evaporated, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. "Mrs. Ellison worked for me for 11 years. She has non-disclosure agreements. She has a conscience. I cut in. And she has documentation that ties you directly to 14 fraudulent property seizures. Not just the tax liens, the falsified competency reports, the bribed doctors, the payoffs to facility administrators. She provided everything this morning. That's why you're making an offer. Because you know the case against you is already sealed." Quentin stood up. For a moment, I thought he might strike me. But then he smiled again, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. "You think a bookkeeper's files will hold up in court? I have judges on retainer. I have politicians who owe me favors. You're a widowed nurse and a teenager. You have nothing." Leo reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. "We have a live feed transmitting directly to the sheriff's fraud unit. They've been listening since I walked through the door." Quentin froze. The front door pushed open all the way, and the morning light flooded in. Behind us, on the porch, Detective Reyes stood with two uniformed officers. She held up a folded document. "Quentin Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder fraud, forgery of public records, money laundering, and, this just came in, suspicion of attempted murder in the case of Frank Dobbs. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." Quentin's eyes darted to the back door, the kitchen, the hall. For a second, I thought he might run. Then he looked at me, and something in his face crumbled. Not remorse. Defeat, he knew. The officers crossed the room. They turned him, handcuffed him, read his rights while he stood there in Harold's living room, his bourbon still sweating on the coaster. As they led him past me, he stopped. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes, it is," I said. "This is my house, and you will never step inside it again." They took him away. The cruiser pulled out of the driveway, and the black sedan was towed an hour later. The quiet that followed was so heavy, so complete, that I sank down onto Harold's armchair, warm from where Quentin had sat, and let myself cry. Leo knelt beside me. "Grandma?" "I'm okay," I whispered. I never thought I'd sit in this chair again." This was Harold's chair. He used to read here in the evenings. I'd sit on the couch with my knitting and listen to him turn the pages. 10 years we sat in this room together, and for 3 months I thought it was gone forever. Leo didn't say anything. He just stayed there, his hand on mine, until the tears stopped. The days that followed were a cyclone. Detective Reyes's investigation turned out to be larger than any of us had guessed. 14 properties, 12 victims still in facilities, 3 suspicious deaths under review, and a network of complicit doctors, court clerks, and care home administrators now facing charges. Quentin's bail was denied, flight risk, and an active federal RICO investigation now. Eleanor, after 2 weeks in custody and the prospect of life in prison, took a deal, full cooperation in exchange for 20 years. My daughter-in-law Lydia, Leo's mother, was charged as an accessory but offered a plea to lesser charges after testifying against her parents. Her sentence was 5 years, with credit for time served if she completed a rehabilitation program. Michael was never charged. The district attorney determined he'd been manipulated and deceived, not complicit. He gave a full statement, tearful and broken, and then checked himself into a treatment program for depression and codependency. The house was officially returned to me on a clear November morning. Leo had transferred the deed from his trust into both our names, with a lifetime tenancy clause that meant I could never be forced out again. I hugged him for a very long time when he showed me the paper. But the surprising moment, the one I'll never forget, came 3 days after we moved back in. I was cleaning out the drawer of the old desk in Harold's study, a drawer I hadn't opened since before he died. Inside, behind a stack of old warranty cards and mortgage statements, was a manila envelope with my name on it, in Harold's handwriting. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were the case notes he'd compiled on Quentin Vance, photographs of Quentin meeting with the county clerk, copies of bank statements, a timeline of the Callaways' property transfer, and a letter, Rose. It read, "If you're reading this, I didn't get the chance to finish. I've been watching Quentin since the day he married into our family. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to frighten you, and I thought I had more time. If anything happens to me, take these to the sheriff. There's a young detective named Reyes who's already interested. And tell Leo I'm proud of him. He's got more spine than the rest of them combined. I know he'll look after you. Love always, Harold." He'd written it 2 months before his diagnosis. 2 months before the cancer appeared. He'd known. He'd started the fight that Leo finished. That night, I sat in Harold's chair with the letter in my lap and Leo in the armchair across from me. He was reading a book for school, but he looked up and caught me crying again. Not sad tears, but the kind that come when you realize you were never as alone as you thought. "You okay, Grandma?" I nodded. "Your grandfather left us a message. He said he's proud of you." Leo's face softened. He looked out the window at the rose bushes, bare now with the season, and said, "I know. He told me once when I was little that the best thing a man can do is protect the people he loves. I didn't really understand then, but I do now." Outside, the November wind rattled the branches, but inside, the house was warm and full. The garage door was closed. The roses would bloom again in spring. I am 76 years old, and I have my home. I have my grandson, and I have a letter from my husband reminding me that love doesn't stop when a person dies. It just takes a new shape. Sometimes it's a teenage boy in a blazer carrying a deed. Sometimes it's a man who spent his last months gathering evidence. And sometimes it's the front door of a house, swinging open, welcoming you back. This is Rose Bennett, and this is how I came home. Looking back, I think about how close I came to losing everything. Not just the house, though that was the visible prize, but my identity, my voice, my place in the world. The scheme they ran was elegant in its cruelty: isolate the target, manufacture a narrative of decline, and use the legal system as a weapon. And it almost worked. It would have worked, if not for a quiet boy who paid attention, and a husband who loved me enough to prepare even after he was gone. Since coming home, I've learned things that keep me awake some nights. Elder fraud is a $50 billion industry in this country, and most of it happens inside families. Sons, daughters, in-laws. The people you should trust most are often the ones holding the pen when you sign away your future. I was lucky. Leo fought for me. But there are thousands of seniors in facilities right now who have no Leo. No Harold. No Detective Reyes knocking on the door. They sit in vinyl chairs by locked windows, waiting for visitors who never come, while their homes are sold to strangers who don't even know the names of the roses in the front yard. The system is slow and stacked. The Vances operated for 15 years because no one asked why a car dealership owner kept appearing at tax auctions for little old ladies' houses. The county clerk who tried to stop it ended up in a wheelchair. It took a teenager with a landscaping business and a bank officer who kept his promises to break it open. That shouldn't be the bar. It shouldn't take a miracle. Michael is still in treatment. I visit him once a week. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip, it's a slow rebuild, brick by brick, the way Harold taught me. Some days I'm angry. Some days I remember the boy he was before weakness and a manipulative wife hollowed him out. Leo is patient with him, more than I am. He says everyone deserves a chance to come home. I'm trying to believe that. The house feels different now. Fuller, maybe. Leo moved into the guest room while he finishes high school online. He still works his landscaping jobs on weekends, but now he parks his old truck in the garage next to Harold's tools. The roses are pruned and mulched. In the spring, they'll bloom again, 17 bushes, one for every year before the children came. I'll be here to see them. So that's my story. I'm Rose Bennett, and I came home. But I'm left with a question I want to ask you. If someone you loved was being slowly erased, labeled confused, moved away, silenced, would you see it in time? And would you have the courage to stand against your own family to stop it? Let me know in the comments. Share your thoughts. And if this story meant something to you, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next one. We're building a community of people who believe it's never too late to fight back, and that our best chapters can happen at any age. Thank you for listening.